Hello there, Mandy here. Restorative Grief with Mandy Capehart is not just a podcast. It's also a book, a free online grief group, and a one-on-one private coaching practice. If you are interested in learning more, visit mandykapehart.com to find out how restorative grief can help you heal heart, mind, body, and spirit. Welcome back to Restorative Grief with Mandy Capehart. You are listening to episode 235, titled Holding Space at the Edge of Goodbye with Darnell Lamont Walker. What if being present for a death isn't about having special training or the right words, but about our capacity to love when someone is at their most vulnerable? And what if facing death with honesty and courage can actually teach us how to live more fully? Today, we're preparing for a conversation that invites us to rethink everything we've been taught to fear about death and dying. We're welcoming Darnell Lamont Walker, a death doula and storyteller whose new book, titled Never Can Say Goodbye, offers a deeply human guide for everyday people, showing us that sitting with grief, listening to stories, and staying present at life's end is not beyond us, but already within us. This is a conversation about love, presence, and the quiet courage it takes to show up. Hey everyone, welcome back to Restorative Grief with Mandy Capehart. I'm your host, Mandy, and today our guest is someone who invites us into those most tender spaces in life, not with fear, but with love and courage and a whole lot of grace. In his new book, Never Can Say Goodbye, death doula and author Darnell Lamont Walker shares stories from the bedside that remind us death is not just about endings, but about our presence, storytelling, and the threads of connection that bind us to one another. Darnell, thank you so much for being here today.
No, thank you so much. I'm truly honored to be here. I love what you're doing, and to be a part of that means so much to me.
Well,
Thank you so
thank you.
much.
Yeah, absolutely. What I loved about your book, and it starts right in the dedication, you dedicated it to those who held it together when they needed to fall apart, for the ones who carried the weight of others' grief when theirs went unseen. And when I read that, it felt like both an honor, but also a quiet confession. And so I'm curious, when you wrote those words, what were you thinking about? What were you carrying? What made that
Yeah,
be something you needed to say out loud?
it was that writing a book is hard, but I have to admit that writing the dedication was the hardest part of writing that book,
Yeah.
because it's like, who does this go out to? And then I wrote it. I wrote it maybe. It was the final thing when they said, "Listen, we have to have this today. Please send it in." And then I just sat and thought about everything that went into that book, and everyone who I've worked with over the years, who I've spoken to over the years, and all these people who say I had to be the strong one. And so I know that they've avoided these conversations that I have in the book. They've avoided these stories that are in the book. They probably won't even read the book, but I want them to at least get to those words and say, "Oh, this is for me too." Um, and so I thought about them, and I thought about how hard it must be to keep that in, how hard it must be to move through this world and not feel witnessed. Um, and it just poured out once I thought about it. It just came out, and I said, "Oh, this is it." And yeah, I was talking to my friends and talking to everyone who knew, everyone who was sort of involved in this book in some way. And I said, "Who do I dedicate this to?" And they say, "Well, of course, your grandma. Of course, you talk about your grandma. Of course, it's your grandma." I was like, "No, no, no, she's in there. That's not it." And so when it came out, it was so, just, "Oh, of course, this is it." And I look at it now and I'm like, I don't know who wrote this. I have no idea who wrote this book at all. It like wasn't me, but it came out somehow. And I'm so grateful for that.
Yeah, gosh, you're naming what feels like this invitation that came out of you toward others, even if that's as far as they get in the book, to not talk about death necessarily, but to finally see and name and honor that emotional labor that they've been doing on behalf of everyone without asking
Hmm.
themselves, how am I actually doing here? It's
Yeah.
beautiful. I
Yeah.
love
Thank
it.
you so much.
Well, it's clear that you wrote this book for the ordinary people of us, the everyday non-grief specialists, to help them recognize their own capacity to do this
Hmm.
work and to love others through really vulnerable, scary moments. When did you realize this was the book that you wanted to write?
I don't mm, know when that moment came. And it's funny because I didn't set out to write this book. It was I'd written a few one-offs. I wrote an article for LA Times about the importance of Black Death doulas, and my agent Lane Clark, she gets it. She sees it. She wasn't my agent at the time. She's a person on LinkedIn, and
Mhm.
she says, "Yeah, I read your article. I loved it. Would you be interested in ever turning this into a book?" And I say, "Oh, well, yeah, I guess that makes sense. Sure, I could do that." So I sent a few things into her, and she's like, "Let's shop it around." And even then, even during the shopping around part, I'm a writer, as a profession, and I in Hollywood, and so I come from this place where, yeah, everyone takes meetings. Nothing ever comes of these things. But sure, if you want to waste your time shopping this thing into the world, go for it. And we get a bite, and it's like, oh, someone else thinks would be an important piece of work too. And then that's when I say, oh, I can absolutely write, like, all of this is in my head. All of this has been in there all of this time. And so even the process of writing was easy because I just sat down and the stories came and they just fell out of me. But I think it was when I saw when Harper One said, "We want it," and I thought, oh, people want this. Because again, I come, like, even in this work, everyone's avoiding this conversation. Even the families that I come and see, the people who are at the end sometimes are like, yeah, I don't want to deal with this. It's like, okay. And so I think it was when they said, yeah, this is a book. And I thought, I'll believe you and let's get to work.
I love that because you're 100% right. The work that you and I do, and so many people we admire and look up to in this field, will say the same thing. Gosh, why is it so complex? And we know the answer, but we still ask, why is it so complex to get someone to understand that grief and dying are part of life and living? And that's
Mhm.
something that I think in your work you have, and certainly in your book and the stories, you named multiple times. So many people are avoidant and feel they could never do what you do. What do
Mhm.
you want people who read or anyone who's listening to understand about presence and
Yeah.
love and life and living that might surprise them?
I think what will surprise them, and what I want them to recognize, you said it earlier, it's that they have done the work. They're doing the work. This is not something that's reserved. This work isn't something that's reserved for special people or people who have these magic abilities or the power to say the right thing. This is all of us, and we've all done it in some way. Maybe you weren't at the bedside holding someone's hand when they took their last breath, but you sat quietly with a friend when they lost their job or after a breakup or when they were dealing with something that they couldn't name, something they wouldn't say out loud, and you had no idea what was happening, but you may have saved their life and you don't know. But we've all done the work, and that's what surprises people because they do say, I get there, I get to the family, and I'll get to the person, and they'll say, there's no way I could do what you do. And I say, well, what have you been doing before? What were you doing before I arrived? And they say, well, I was just sitting here and getting them water. Well, that's the work too, so I want them to see that. I want them to see that this work isn't just one thing. It's so many things, and we've all done what we could, and we've all done so much of it. Even just witnessing, even just letting a person know that we see them and that they are here and we see that they are here, and we will make sure that they get carried forward.
Mm.
Mhm.
So much of the work that I picked up from in your book reminded me of this idea of tending, more so than caregiving, the concept of tending a garden and
Mhm.
recognizing it is cyclical. It requires intentionality, it requires me to go toward it. And I was thinking about that through the whole time I was reading this story of you and your grandmother and just the way she tended to your development and your personhood by telling you the stories about her sister who was dying and bringing you through the process in a, I'm hoping, a child appropriate way, of course, but I'm curious how being invited into those stories at such a young age shaped your relationship to death, not as an ending but as something that is process and is much like gardening.
Yeah. I am so grateful that she did that. And I don't know if it was so child appropriate in in the 80s, but
Yeah.
um but I am so honored that that she was there and it was her that did that. Because it was just the fact that she had friends and we had family who die often, and she was the one who made food to take to the family's house. She was the one who visited the hospitals. I just happened to be the favorite grandchild, and she was happened to be my favorite person, and so I was just there. And so it was just, it had to happen. I had to see it, and it showed me that, oh, this is what we do for people we love. We take care of them. We hold their hand. We go visit them. We make them food when they can't do it themselves. We feed them. We invite them into our house. We become the person in the community that people can come to, for love, for being seen, for just a breath. And so as I get older, from that point, it was kind of, just a very natural thing. Like, oh, death happens. It happens so often for her, um, that and me seeing it, I'm like, oh, well, people die. And so later in life, when I deal with um, my own when I have to face my own mortality, I'll say, it wasn't a scary thing. Like, death hasn't been a scary thing for me ever. I don't think it was always just, well, this is what happens, and or even just falling apart. Like, I she took care of people when they fell apart, and I just always thought, well, if I fall apart, I don't want to. It would be very inconvenient, but there are people who can put you back together.
Mhm.
If you have the right people in your life, there are people who can put you back together. And so that it taught me that, like, being there with her and watching her throughout all of that taught me that. And so as I move forward, I try to talk to people about the importance of having people like that around, having people like my grandmother around. Um, Now, hopefully, people like me. It's like, yeah, fall apart if you need to. This is what I'm here for. And even for myself, I remind myself often that, no, there are people here. Let them love you. Let those people love you.
Yeah. Yeah, it takes a lot of humility to and vulnerability to be a person that can we'll say allow others to influence and love us and take care of us. And there was a moment in the book that you wrote about standing with someone at the end of their life is like standing at the edge of the ocean, being pulled in by something vast and unknowable. And I'm just curious, how does that image, how does that sensation help someone who's new and unfamiliar and nervous about this state of life recognize the value of humility in those moments?
Yeah, it's sort of that moment where you let people know that it's okay to let go,
Mm.
that you are here to love them, and some and what I found is that people want to surrender when it's that tough, and it's like, but I'm. What are you holding on for? What you have to figure out what it is they're holding to, um, even giving them that permission to let go, to die. But I'm reminded of my grandfather, who, when he was dying, I was there for him, and in the last, I'd say in the last week and a half, it had taken like we went from sitting at the table eating crabs to 2 days later he can't get out of bed, and he has to, my grandmother has to go in, and she has to change the sheets and put a new gown on him, and I go in to help her, and he's like, I don't want you to see me like this, and there was so much shame, and I'm like, no, that's not what this is. I'm here because I want to be, and because I love you, and this is what love looks like. Um, and so you have to let go of that, and you see it just kind of melt away. And from there forward, it was like, okay, I can receive this help, you know. But it does take that humility, and I think we as the people who are the workers in this space, um, can really help with that, and really just create a space that feels safe enough to do that in. Like, we have to do that. That's our part, uh, and make sure they recognize that.
Well, how do you create that space when you're going into it and potentially it's unknown, or it's
Mhm.
every situation is unknown because they're unfamiliar despite the circumstances being similar? What do you do to prepare yourself knowing you're stepping into something so much larger? It's such a sacred environment every time you step in. How do
Oh yeah.
you get yourself into that space to say, okay, I'm going from writing for children's stories into helping
Mhm.
tend to this person?
No, I honestly, I don't know if there's anything I I can do, um, other than go in knowing that I'm going to go in and listen. I'm going to go in and just make sure the person feels seen, and make sure that I am an observer. I'm here to listen and observe, and then I can figure out what's happening. I don't know if I can go in with expectations or any real planning, because everyone is so different. I had a client toward the end of last year who um, was the youngest client I've ever had. He was 21. And so I go in nervous every time. Every time it's like, oh, what what is this going to be? Because I don't want to get anything wrong, you know. And so I go in, and I'd already talked to the nurses. The nurses, his nursing team is who called me in, but he's 21. He's very close to death. He's blind and deaf on one side. He can't communicate, and he can't really move. Um, and so, well, he couldn't talk at the time. And so I'm already going in like, well, what do I do here? And so I just decided that I couldn't prepare myself for that. It was just the only thing I could do was to say, I'm going to go in, and I'm going to listen and see if there's a way, if there's something that me and him can do, if there's a way for us to communicate. And I was able to find a way. I talked to the nursing team, had them bring in a tablet where I could, point to letters, or he could um, look towards some of the letters, or and even papers. And then it was decided, like, I would spend hours there just massaging his scalp and playing music in his one ear, and you see, and he smiles, and it's like, this is it. But I had no idea before going in what that would be. And I was able to then communicate with the nursing team and say, well, this is what he likes. This is how this works. But I don't, other than going in to be a listener and knowing that part is is the only preparation I've been able to do.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Man, it is such an imperfect process, and I think you landed very squarely on that recognition of showing up imperfectly is still showing up. And it's not that you're going in saying, well, if I cause harm, no big deal. You're definitely going in with that intention of showing dignity and respect and really bringing the personhood back into the process of death and dying. I think that that's something that we're all very nervous about, especially clinically, right? When we know the horror stories people have experienced in the hospitals, and I have my own from my mom dying, and knowing that, gosh, can the person's dignity and humanity be honored and continued? And I think that's one thing that compelled me so much about your work was the emphasis, of course, of storytelling and making space for people to tell their stories how they want it. I was very, very deeply offended for the person whose family disregarded his religious
Mhm.
beliefs after he died,
Mhm.
knowing that's a common experience,
Yeah.
and recognizing that, gosh, this importance, that freedom of autonomy and expression at the end is still crucial.
Ah, yes. I think the moments that have made me so upset. Like I still think about that, and
Mhm.
years ago. This happened a while ago, and I still think about that. And so it's like, okay, now I have to fight families, like okay, you know, um, but it's so crucial. And and so when I come in, it's my job. A part of what I do, what I love to do is help people get control um, in a moment where they really don't have much.
Yeah.
And so, like, this is it. This is the moment. This is yours. And so, for someone to take that away, really just drives me crazy, and so I want people to, I want people to walk away from this book saying, "Oh, if this is their last moment, if this is what they want, let me be the one to help them get that." Um, because I've seen what happens when we don't. Like it's not good. And then there's so much regret from the people who didn't allow them to have that. It's like this could be easy for
Yeah.
everyone, you too. And they don't get it.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Okay, this is not a right or wrong. There's no right or wrong answer to this, but I'm just personally curious. So, when my mom died, she did not want a funeral service. She didn't want any kind of memorial, and we honored that. And over the last decade, I have wrestled both with myself and with other people asking their opinion of, well, if a memorial is for the living to celebrate and be comforted and together, why wouldn't she want one? And I can answer why I don't think she wanted one or why she didn't want one, but I'm just curious, are services like that for the living, or are we in our love and allegiance to someone's independence right to the end, honoring their wishes by saying they didn't want one, we don't do one.
Yeah, yes to both. um, it's
Right. This
it's a
is
very
why there's no right
yes
or
to
wrong
both.
answer.
There's no right or wrong. Yes to both. Yes, it is for the living to gather and to find out who's in their community, to hold each other up, to because it's hard. It's you to be isolated um, and alone with all that grief and not able to tell those stories and to talk about the person is tough, especially in those days that follow the death, right? But I think also, yes, I think we do honor what people tell us to do when it's about them. And oddly enough, I hear that so often, so often. I don't want a funeral service. Um, don't have anything for me. Um, but usually it's followed by, but if you all need to have some food and whatever at the house, then you go and do that. But I don't want this service. And so it helps that family do that. Or a year later, they all get together to have that, to celebrate the birthday in the park, whatever that is. But it is for us. It is because we need those people. We need those hugs and we need those stories. And I always say I think it's so important that everyone shows up at the funeral because none of us have the full story of a person, but we all can come together and have these little pieces that make at least a fuller story. Um, and so I think that it's important and it has to happen in some way. You just have to find the loophole. Like we won't have a funeral, no, but we will have a repast, and we will have
We,
a picnic at
yeah,
the park.
absolutely. It's not a funeral, and we're not
It's
going
not
to
a
say it's a
funeral.
wake or a celebration of life, but we are going to, I don't know, think about you while we go gather around this table and
Yeah,
tell
well, we're at
stories.
the buffet,
Yeah.
it's fine.
Oh, I love it. Thank you. I'm thinking now about how that part of walking through grief on the other side of losing someone is it's the picture of what they wanted us to do and what we did with them when they were here, right? It's the reminder that even in death, grief is about living fully. And I'm thinking a little bit too about your story about Audrey in the book and how being close to death can change how we want to live. And I'm curious, I know you love to travel, but
Mhm.
are there other ways that stories like Audrey's have reminded you, stay in the moment, do the thing, go for the meal, say yes to the adventure?
Yes, it's that thing about like even my own story. I when I was 22, I was diagnosed with the blood clotting disorder that uh, I could die at any moment is what they tell me, and I honor that. I'm like, yeah, I could. So because of that, I'm going to have the dessert first, or I am going to go to this place. This job is not that important that I have to be here to take this kind of abuse, or whatever that is. And Audrey's story was not so unique, but the way she decided to embrace life and what caused her to embrace life um, won't happen to everyone. But I think what will happen to everyone is that every so often we will think about the moment we died. We will lose someone. We will lose a friend. Every time I get on social media, someone has lost someone and I know that for them that's a reminder that someday I'm going to go too. And I think we have to take those moments when we think that and when we come face to face or come to the thought that this thing doesn't last forever. That person died unexpectedly. I could too, and honor that even if it's just for that day, even if it's for that hour, whatever that is, to honor that and say, oh, you know what I've always wanted to do? This thing. I'm going to go do this thing. Um, I don't need that. And to sit in that, not to let that moment pass, not to, rush it out of your head, sit in it for as long as it stays. And and in that we make decisions that are for us, you know. Because it's going to happen. I tell friends all the time, you don't forget you're going to die. Do you think I should take this job? If you were dying in a year, would you take that job? I'm like, yeah. But I tell people, I think we'd all be blessed to have a diagnosis or a scare that we could that this is it and see what changes, see how that impacts us. Um, but even like other people's deaths at least should be a reminder
Mm.
that time is limited. We have to do the things that we want to do, the things we're here for, the things we've been thinking about, the things that matter.
Yeah, it's a mixture of recognizing when you've allowed anticipatory grief of your own demise to overrun and freeze you up
Mhm,
and not absorbing yourself with memento mori and staying constantly
mhm,
aware of I too shall die, I too shall die. Because there is kind of a melancholy that can come in with that too, and steal that vibrancy of who we are and
Mhm.
the life that we lead. But I also know in my own life, it's been such a joy to be able to be really, really present in specific moments and like actively remind myself, hey, body, hey, nervous system, we're here right now. Take as much enjoyment as you can, not
Mhm.
with the fear of this is the last time, because that fear is always present somewhere else.
Oh yeah.
Um,
Yep.
but that just reminder to really celebrate the threads of life that connect me to the people that I want to be around and look for what do I see here that can be the most enduring or
Yeah.
sustaining.
Oh, absolutely. Because even me now, I think of like when I'm doing things. Connection is so heavy for me. It's such a amazing thing, and I now as I move through life, I think, what do I want to remember? Will I remember this moment at the end? Like so, now my life feels like a collection of things that when the end comes, these are all the things that I'm going to look back and say that was beautiful. Like there's you know, um, a mountain range here, and this moment I spent with family here. Like all of these things I'm going to remember. And I want that for us all. I want that for everyone.
Well, I think you invite everyone into it by talking about how you've written your own obituary and you
Mhm.
revise it on a regular basis. It's
Oh,
something I did as an exercise once upon a time, but in reading your story, I was like, I should do that again. Not,
mhm.
it's not a macabre thing. It is a what what self are you putting into the world? What self do you want represented? And I very strongly align with the don't sugarcoat it. I can be terrible. I can be exhausting because guess what? I
Yes,
am just as human as
absolutely.
everyone else.
Absolutely. And that's so important. Like I love the obituary that's actually put in the book of a friend's mom.
Yeah.
Because when she wrote me, she was like, I don't want it to be this wrapped up sweet story. I want to tell the full story of my mom, who was very complicated. She was loving. She played games with us. She'd come around every so often. But she also battled with drug addiction. And she, there were, these things that she couldn't quite face. And it's like, yeah, let's put this all in there. And to see the anger that the family had when we put it out there, they were so upset. But I'm like, this is your mom. This is the story that you get to tell. You get to tell her story. Um, but that's the important. That's what I want. That's the important thing. Um, yeah.
I think it names and identifies the shame that so many of us are living under by saying you can't put our laundry out there. You can't tell the whole story. That's dishonoring. It's actually the opposite. It gives us our dignity. It allows us to be human and imperfect and
Exactly.
magically still lovable.
Exactly.
As if a flaw were to take that from us, that's
Hmm.
false
Yeah.
in the highest order. So,
No, it's awful. Yeah.
yeah. You know, I don't want to glaze over it. You said it at the beginning, and I want to make sure we touch on this. You
Mhm.
were talking about the importance of Black men and women in the death doula world and in the end of life circus of all the, services that are demanded and things that people deserve to have representation and feel
Mhm.
safe and feel attunement and connection with their culture. But I also know the percentage is very low. What
Mhm.
is it like for you, and how do you create compassion for yourself, knowing you're going into scenarios where you are paving new ground for people and you're normalizing
Yeah.
what it's like for both for Black men and women to grieve culturally and just collectively, but also in a way that does feel foreign and that has unspoken nuance to it in every corner.
Yeah. It's been so beautiful for me. Because I get to come into spaces where death wasn't a conversation. Like Black folks, we don't talk about death. We don't have these conversations with family. We don't plan. We don't do too much planning. It's such a rare thing to witness. So I get to come in and one help this person transition who when like I come in and my first question is, how do you want to die? And this is a question no matter how long they've been with this illness, how close they are to death, no one's asked this question because if I don't talk about death, it won't happen.
Yeah.
Right. So I get to come in and have these conversations, and then everyone's like, "Oh, oh, and I get to watch this arc. So by the end, by this transition, um, everyone's come around to, oh, I see how important this was. I see what went wrong, what could have gone wrong, and what's gone wrong in the past. I seen when, grandma, grandpa so and so died, how there was no planning. Uh, there was no, even the simplest details. There was never a talk about death. So when the death came, everyone fell apart. Family has, there are family members who haven't seen each other in years. Um, and so now, and I get to talk about that with them and say, well, is this what you want? And they say, no. Okay, well, this is how we can make it different. So we go from not having the conversation at all to everyone in the room now writing their own obituary, planning their funerals, planning, having these conversations with their kids. And so that's been a beautiful thing. But also just showing, being able to witness and affirm just how communal the grieving process is for us. It's like, yeah, we want to be the strong one. We want to run from it, but we need each other. We need to be together. And if we all fall apart, we all fall apart. No one here has to be the strong person. No one here has to be the one who is the rock. You too can cry with everyone else. Because what's going to happen is if you don't, you're going to go home, and then when you're going through it and everyone else is not healed but grieving differently from
Yeah.
that initial grief, that first hit of grief, you're going to be alone and not understand why no one's there to hold you. And so being able to show all of that has been such a great thing, and to have these conversations, has been great for me. I love it, and it's strange. I even just being a guy in this field, I didn't realize that it wasn't a common thing until I was on a call about a year ago, a conference call. It's about 50 death duels on there, and someone stops in the middle of the call, says, "Hey, before we go on, I just want to shout out Darnell for being the only male here." And I look around and I'm like, "Oh, oh, I guess I am." Um, and so I've been talking to friends like, "Hey, you ever think about being a death doula? We could really use you over here."
Mm.
Because people want people that look like them a lot of times. It's like, oh,
Yeah.
you get it, you understand. And there are so many Black men who don't get to grieve themselves, who were the strong ones in their family. And so I'm grateful to be able to be called in and be there with them and say, hey, no, no, I've had the same thoughts. I've had the same feelings. I grew up in this kind of family. You are very much like my father, very much like my grandfather, or but you don't have to be that. And they say, oh, I could be that. Okay, fine. And even if it's the last day, it's this that letting go. Oh, I can let go to create that space. It's me coming in and creating that space for them to do that.
So much permission to just release tension and expectations and explore, like you said, even in the last moments, what it feels like for them to be fully alive and fully themselves and
Yeah,
present.
yeah, absolutely.
Oh man. Okay, Darnell, as one of the few wonderful Black men in the death doula world, how can someone who is hearing you speak and is inspired and wants to learn more about your work get in touch with you?
Oh, I believe I'm everywhere. All the socials, Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook, um, darnellwalker.com. Uh, I, I love to be, I love when people contact me about this work, about, even it's like, I don't know if this is for me, but I'd love to talk about it to see if it's for me, or, you know, can someone like me do this work, or what does this mean, or someone's dying and I want to be able to be there for just this one person. What can I do? And so I love those conversations. I love when people reach out and say that. But yeah, I'm everywhere, just Darnell Lamont Walker, wherever.
Perfect. Well, if
Mhm.
you're listening and you're interested, I highly recommend his new book, Never Can Say Goodbye: The Life of a Death Doula and the Art of a Peaceful End. It's beautiful. Needs to be on everybody's shelf. And I don't know if you can see all my bookmarks. I've been
I see it in
lots of notes. Oh, thank you so much. This has been rich and wonderful. And I'm just so grateful.
Thank you so much. I'm so honored to be here with you. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you for listening to episode 235 of Restorative Grief. Today's conversation invited us to consider death not as something to fear, but as something to face with love, courage, curiosity, and presence. Through the work of death doula and storyteller Darnell Lamont Walker, we explored how sitting with our grief, listening to stories, and showing up in vulnerable moments is not reserved for the specialist. It's a capacity many of us already hold. If you'd like to learn more about Darnell's book, Never Can Say Goodbye, and his work, you can find links to both in the show notes. If you're interested in learning more about restorative grief, you can read a first chapter of my book on Amazon for free, and there's a link in the show notes for that as well. But if this episode resonated with you at all, I sure hope you'll subscribe, leave a 5-star review, and consider becoming a patron to support the work financially. In doing so, you'll gain access to monthly bonus episodes, as well as weekly reflective workbooks that accompany each episode, including this one. Thank you to all of my past and present patrons. Your support keeps this work going, and as always, before we go, one last thing. Please remember, the only solution for grief is to do the work of grieving. Thank you for listening. I'll see you next week.